Let's go over how you can start to develop a reliable around the green chip shot. So when it comes to saving shots when you're on the golf course, driver is probably at the top of the list. You have to be able to keep the ball in play. But if you're able to do that, that is where I start to turn to the short game for players that are really trying to lower their scores and save shots every round. So we're going to go over sort of club selection, what I don't like to see, technique, common errors that I will see, and then we will start to get into what I do want to see from a technique standpoint, and we'll go over a few different positions around this green, kind of talking club selection and when I use different clubs in what spot. But the technique for these is going to remain pretty much identical. So the biggest mistake I will see with players is going to be, I will set them up on a shot like this, kind of a routine greenside chip shot. Don't have a forced carry. We're not trying to carry a bunker or carry water. We have a decent amount of green to work with. Again, just trying to kind of get it onto this green and let it go. Almost every time what I will see players do, especially mid to higher handicappers, is they take out a 60 degree or a 58 degree and they hit a shot that is unnecessarily high to get back to this pin. So when you have a club with more loft, obviously the face is going to be a little bit more open versus, say, a pitching wedge. So if I have a 60 degree, again, face is very flat. If I have a pitching wedge, face is going to be closer to 46, 47 degrees of loft, a little flatter. So if I have more loft, I have to swing harder to get this ball to go the same distance. So this is where your misses are going to be much bigger. So if I am taking a 60 degree wedge and I'm making a swing to get back to this pin that's probably somewhere in this area, kind of like waist high to get back to that flag, and I'm swinging that big and I'm swinging that hard, but I catch this ball just a little bit thin. Say I pick up on it just a little bit, I make a relatively big swing on it, and then I blade that ball, that thing is gone. It has absolutely no chance. So the opposite is true, where I have so much loft, if I swing a little too easy or if I chunk it just a little bit or get a little underneath of it, that ball has no chance to run out because you have so much loft. That ball is just going to kind of dribble in front of you, or it's just going to pop up, land soft, and you have no chance of getting this thing to run back to the flag. So most of the time when you are around the green, I would like to see the 58 and 60 degrees almost fully eliminated. We'll talk about some situations where I would use it, but I would recommend you go down to something closer like a pitching wedge or an approach wedge, 52 degree at most, as kind of your go-to club. So that is going to be kind of the spiel on club selection, is I do not want to see you getting something with a ton of loft when you don't have a forced carry. So this is where my go-to is typically a pitching wedge or a 50 degree. It's kind of that mid-range, not too flat-faced, not too open. But this is where, when it comes down to those misses, I can now swing a little bit easier. So when I have a shot like this, I no longer have to swing waist high to waist high. I can swing much smaller, and because I have so much less loft, I can say I hit this ball a little bit thin. Say I'm swinging a little bit easier, but I blade this ball and kind of top it, it still is going to work out because I didn't swing that hard at it. So that is going to be the idea here, where my miss, I hit that ball absolutely horrible, but it still ended up completely fine, versus a 60 degree where I swing a little bit bigger and I miss it, is obviously over the back of the green. If I try to hit one a little bit more solid, again, you can see pretty similar length backswing, and the bad one ended up better than the one that was struck well. But hopefully you kind of see the idea with the club selection there. So when it comes to technique, the biggest mistakes I will see is players will get the ball way too far forward, the stance will be way too wide, and the weight will be too even in the feet. So I will see a lot of players, again, take a 60 degree, they'll get set up with the inside heels about hip width apart, that stance will be wider, ball will usually be middle of the stance, weight will be pretty even, and I'll see players get in here and almost try to lift these up in the air a little bit and kind of just hang back on the back foot a little bit and not really get any weight shifting forward. So this is going to set you up for failure because your low point is going to be very hard to control. I'll see a lot of players do this thinking they're trying to use the bounce. We're not really too concerned with the bounce on these shots. We're really trying to hit ball first. If this ball works down into the ground after, it's not the biggest deal in the world, because we are trying to hit this ball low. We're trying to kind of hit down on back of this golf ball, get this thing to come out low and run. So I don't need to get my stance wide. I don't need to get this face open. I don't need to use the bounce to get this this ball lifted up into the air. That's going against everything we're trying to do here. So what I would prefer to see with these is you get the stance very narrow. That is going to help with a little bit of weight distribution, help you keep that weight more forward. And when I say narrow, ideally I want to see the heels about a club head width apart, somewhere in this vicinity. So this is where a lot of times I will try to get this ball in line with the back big toe or inside of the back foot. It doesn't need to be way back in through here, but if we can get this thing very narrow with the stance, get this ball lined up kind of back big toe or inside of the back heel, this is where I now want you to think about where the center of your chest is, or kind of where your head is. You can think about either one of these things. And what I do not want to see is you think you're getting your weight forward and you bump your hips forward and you get your weight onto your front foot, but you start to lean back with your upper body. So I have almost all of my weight on my front foot right now, but you can see my spine is leaned back. This is going to give you major issues because yes, your hips and your weight are forward, but when your spine is leaned this far back, it's usually going to dump this club into the ground a little too soon. So this is where I like to think about it with the upper body, where you almost need to think about your shirt buttons getting tilted on top of your left foot. Percentage wise, everyone's can feel it a little differently. I don't want 100% of your weight forward, but if you feel like you get the center of the chest or the shirt buttons on that front foot and you feel like it's like 60-70% of the weight forward, totally fine with that. And the big cue here is, again, shirt buttons are getting onto the front of the foot. I don't want to see you keep your hands back. I would like to see you lean the handle a little bit forward, getting these hands forward. But your biggest cue is you have to keep the weight on the front side. I don't want you getting in here with a great setup with your chest over top of your front foot and your head over top of your front foot. And now as you go and work down, you start to shift backwards and your weight goes back. That is one of the more common issues that I will see. So to troubleshoot this, one drill that I will use with players is something called the kickstand drill. And essentially what you're going to do here is you're going to go ahead and you're going to get in your setup, but you're going to take your back foot and you are going to go back about 3 to 4 inches back behind your front heel, go up onto your toe. So now all of your weight is sort of forced to stay forward, where if I go and I start to lean back, I'm going to start to lose my balance onto this back foot. Face on, if it's going to be the same exact drill, get that toe back, get that weight forward. If you start to lean back on this thing and your chest goes back, you're going to fall. You're going to know right away that weight started to go backwards. So from a technique perspective, that is what I prefer to see. As we go ahead, we get the stance very narrow. If you want to set up with the stance just a little open with that front foot pulled back, I'm not against it, but I don't want to see it super drastically back or way closed. Again, stance narrow, ball on the back of that back foot, or on the kind of inside heel of that back foot. We are going to get the center of the chest over the front foot. Hands are going to be forward. And now our biggest goal here is to make sure that we are keeping that weight on the front side. That's going to get a ball that comes out, cause you to hit a ball that comes out very low. And running, we are not trying to force that thing up into the air, trying to just pop it up over the fringe and fairway and kind of let it run like a putt. So when it comes to the kind of down the line view of the body movements, I don't want to see you adding a whole bunch of wrist hinge. I don't want to see you ripping this club way inside. Ideally, I like to feel like kind of my torso or my shoulders and chest are the main mover here. I feel like I'm getting here and just kind of rocking the chest back and forth, or not necessarily rocking up and down, but just rotating that chest or swiveling around the chest as the weight stays forward. And that usually produces a pretty simple motion of that club, just very gently working to the inside and around the body. So from a technique standpoint, that is going to be the biggest thing. Take lower loft, go ahead and get the stance narrow, ball back, weight and hands forward with the chest over the front foot, and we are going to feel like we rotate the chest, keeping the weight forward the entire time. We are not getting really wristy with these. We are basically feeling like this lead arm and the shaft are in a line with each other, and they stay in a line with each other throughout the shot. We are not breaking that line, adding a bunch of wrist hinge, or really trying to release this club and get this ball up into the air. Now you have a good idea of the technique, so we don't need to go into that side of things as much now. But what we're going to talk about is club selection, and there's sort of two schools of thought. I would say if you are a player that does not have the ability to get out and practice for hours on end, this is where I would kind of have your go-to club. So if you want to pick, again, like a pitching wedge or a 52 degree, and that is kind of your go-to in all situations, I wouldn't fault you for that. I'd rather you become very good and very used to one club versus trying to bounce around between a bunch of different ones. So that is going to be something where, again, if you can get out to practice once a week, you want that one club that you are fully confident with, that is the one I would roll with. The other school of thought is we start taking different clubs in different situations, again, keeping the technique the exact same. And when you're able to practice a little bit more, you can get a little bit better feel in different spots and kind of when to use different clubs. So I would say a lot of that depends on kind of your ability of how much you are able to get out and actually work on these. So this is going to be a very basic shot. We are going to be in through here where I have probably about 9 feet of fairway and fringe to cover. And if you would tell me that you would putt any of these, I would not fight you on that. The putter is going to really limit a lot of the risk. But say you get out to a course that is not very well manicured and this is very bumpy in through here, not reliable to putt it. Say it's early in the morning and it's dewy, putting is not going to be very reliable. That is going to be where, if say it's very grainy or this grass is growing into you quite a bit, that is going to be where putting, that ball can sometimes just kind of pop straight up and it kind of loses all of its steam. So that you have to have a go-to chip shot. So this is going to be very routine. I have, again, probably about 8 to 9 paces or 8 to 9 feet of fringe and fairway to cover. but I have a ton of green to work with. From the fringe line to that pin, I probably have close to 40 feet, 45 feet. So I don't need to carry this ball very far. Realistically, I need to really carry this thing probably up into this region and then let it get on the ground and run. So for this reason, I would say pitching wedge or 9-iron is the play. I have a pitching wedge in my hand, and again, that technique is not changing. So I'm going to get in here, stance is going to be narrow, ball back, weight, and hands forward, chest stays over top of the front foot throughout the shot. And then I'm going to really just try to get this ball to land a couple feet over the fringe, and it should run back there very nicely. So that one was caught a little bit thin, and that again is the beauty of this shot, is contact was not perfect and it ended up 2.5, 3 feet. So that is going to be kind of the shot you will encounter the most, where you're just off the edge, have a decent amount of green to work with, get that good kind of middle of the pack club that you're used to, kind of a lower lofted wedge or pitching wedge somewhere in there, and that is going to be kind of your go-to. But let's look at some other ones. Little bit of a different situation. I still have about the same amount of fringe and fairway to cover, call it 9-10 feet, but now I have even more green to work with. I have closer to probably 50 to 60 feet. So this is where your two options are. You either take the club you're really comfortable with, like that pitching wedge or 52 degree, and you accept that you can just hit it a little bit harder to get it to go a little bit further. Or the other way we can do this is I now have an 8-iron instead of a pitching wedge. So my technique from that last shot is not changing at all. I'm going to get in here with the same exact setup, and I'm going to have an 8-iron in the hand. I'm going to swing about as hard as I did on the last one, and now that I have a little bit less loft, this ball is going to come out very low and running, where now I could swing extremely small and get this ball to carry the 30, 35 yards, whatever it is, to get over to that flag stick without having to take a 60 degree out and make a massive swing where I'm relying on carrying it there. That is about as simple of a motion as you can get. So that is going to be where, when you have these longer shots, don't be afraid to break out something very low lofted like an 8-iron, even a 7 or 6-iron if you have a ton of green to work with and the greens are really slow. Much different situation here. So now I'm again probably 8 to 10 feet off the edge of this green, but this pin is much closer to me. So the whole takeaway with this is you basically want to take as little loft as you can to carry the fringe or whatever kind of is in front of you here to get this thing to land on the green. So what I don't want to do from this spot, most of the time, again, if the course is very well manicured and this is very smooth, kind of link style, that is where taking something lower lofted is not a bad play. But say I get something like this where it's a little grainy, the grass is a little more beat up late in the day. I don't want to take an 8-iron, because to get this ball to travel this distance, I have to swing so easy at this that ball has to land very short of the green. Obviously, it can still end up fine, but when this ball is landing in this area, I'm really kind of leaving it up to, is it going to get a good hop or not? If I hit that ball and it sticks into a little bit of grass that's sticking back into me, that thing could hit, pop straight up in the air and land soft, and now I end up 10 or 12 feet short. So of course, it can work out, but the whole goal is to try to get this thing just over the edge of the fringe or fairway so it can get on the green. So realistically, if I had this shot, what I would do is I would take something a little bit higher lofted, like a 54 degree. This is where we're starting to get into those higher lofted wedges, but my technique is not changing. Just because I have a higher lofted club in my hand does not mean now it needs to go on the front of the stance and I need to help it up in the air. We're letting the loft do the work for us. So I'm going to get in here, get that ball back, hands and weight forward, same exact setup we have been doing. And my goal is to just land this ball right over the edge of the fringe there. That's going to get that thing to travel just over the edge and work back to that pin without leaving it up to chance of what kind of hop is it going to get just short of that green. So that is going to be where, when you do get close, these higher lofted wedges are not necessarily a bad thing, but that technique should not be changing just because you get something with more loft in your hands. We'll stick with these higher lofted wedges. I know in the beginning I said I want the 58 and 60 degrees almost completely eliminated for the most part, but there still are situations around the green where we can use them. Again, I'm sure this is not a surprise at this point. The technique is not changing. My setup is not changing from any of these other shots with the higher lofted club. And again, if you would putt this, I would not fault you whatsoever there. But say you get those situations where the course isn't very well kept, it's very dewy, you don't want to leave it up to chance on how it's going to get through there. This is where we can use the 60 degree to our advantage. So this shot is not very, I don't have a pin that's super close to me, but the greens are a little bit more firm, they're a little faster, and this is running completely away from me. This is running very downhill. So I don't want to hit something like a wedge or an 8-iron again, because I'm going to have to land it back in the fringe. I want to carry all of this. But if I take an 8-iron and I hit this thing hard enough to carry that fringe with the slope, that ball is gone. That thing is going to roll out extremely far. So with how downhill this is, if I get in here with an 8-iron and try to pop it just over the edge of that fringe, that ball is going to be coming in so hot, I have no chance of stopping that. So this is where a situation like this is where the 60 degree can come in handy. So if I get in here, I can make that same swing I just did, but because I have more loft, that ball is going to pop up and land much softer. And now with the extra loft going to land softer, not run out nearly as far. So the 60 degree, it is not something that is completely eliminated. It's going to be most of the time around the green. But if you get something where, say, I had this shot, it was a little flatter, and this pin was kind of right in through here. Wouldn't hate the 60 degree because we're trying to barely land it on, get it to land soft, not a bad play. But that is where if you get very firm, fast, downhill shots, you're just off the edge of the green, the 60 degree can be a great one to carry the fringe that you need to, but get that ball to still run out without being too much. So let's take a look at one more here. This is the last one we're going to look at, and we have not had a shot like this. So everything we've had has been kind of in that 6 to 10 feet off the green range. But now we're starting to get into this gray zone of, is it a higher shot? Is it a lower shot? So I want you guys to have a way to kind of judge these as well. So this is where I get something where I have closer to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, close to about 20 feet of fringe and fairway to cover. So this is where taking an 8-iron, probably not ideal. That ball is going to come in very low and it's going to land just over the fringe. So I'm sure you guys kind of get the idea, but if I take an 8-iron, hit it hard enough to carry that fringe, it's going to be coming in so hot, I have no chance of getting this ball to stop. So this is where when I have a pin that is in the back of the green like this, I still have plenty of room to let this ball run. I just need a little bit more loft to help me get over the edge of this fringe here. So this is where I would take something like a 54 degree, a little bit more loft, and I'm going to play, again, the exact same shot, just going to swing a little bit harder. So I have more loft, I'm going to be swinging harder, this ball is going to get into the air fine. But if I get into this spot with the same setup, I know this needs to carry a little further, that pin's a little further, I need to hit this just a little bit harder. That technique, again, is not going to change at all. It's just going to be swinging a little harder to get that ball up and over. But this is a dicey one. So say that hypothetically I had a pin that's a little bit more in the front edge of this green. This is where things start to get a little tougher, because if you take the 8-iron and you start trying to run it up to the front edge of this green, this is where, again, you really are leaving it up to chance of how good of a bounce are you going to get through this stuff. It may get through cleaner than you expect and run out too far. It may hit a clump of grass and pop straight up, and now you're short of the green still. This is where you do start to kind of venture into getting into these higher lofted 60 degree shots that you need to hit softer and spin a little bit more. But that is going to be a topic for another day on how to hit those. So when you have a lot of green to work with, that is even when you are still off the edge of the green, keep that technique the same. Just grab a little bit more loft just to help you keep that ball lower without trying to get too fancy with it and try a technique that's going to get you in trouble. So a little bit of a longer video. Hope you guys enjoyed that and got a little bit of information out of that. Keep the ball low. Do not throw that thing up high unnecessarily, and your misses are going to come down big time around the green, and it will give you a much more reliable shot. So any questions, as always, drop them in the comments. We'd love if you guys could subscribe to the page, but I will keep getting these out and let me know what you want to see next.